Nothing like having a keyboard in your crotch for a presentation. All right, with that. Hello and welcome to another edition of Tech Deck Karaoke. This week we are joined by Jody Tyrus, and I am extremely excited for this episode. Jody is a longtime friend, longtime colleague, and also a chocolatier who delivers my favorite candies. We're also, unfortunately, joined by Miss Sabrina Schaefer, who I have to bring because she kind of runs the company here. Yeah. With that, Jody, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Jody Tyrus. I have been in tech for about 25 plus years and known Joe for, I think, almost 10 or 12 years now. Background in systems and infrastructure, and spent 10 years with a pure security focus at both large and small companies. I'm currently a technical account manager at a virtualization company here in California, and I have great customers and great colleagues, and excited to be here.
Well, welcome. We are excited to have you. And can you please confirm that we have not discussed your slide deck, the material there, and I have not seen them prior to this episode?
Correct. Joe, you get no leg up here.
No leg up. And Sabrina, can you confirm that as our impartial judge here?
I sure can. You have not seen them. That's right.
All right, then are you wonderful people ready for me to present these slides cold as if I knew what I was doing?
Let's do it.
Here we go. All right. We are going to be discussing why employees think security awareness programs suck and how to fix yours. This is a subject that I have an infinite amount of lack of experience in. So this should be extremely interesting as we go through. The first thing I can tell you is that the main reason your employees think that your security awareness program sucks is because your security awareness program sucks. So the first thing you want to work on is fixing that suck so that your employees don't see it. What we want to look at is the security team should not be operating with what Jody likes to call the ivory tower syndrome. They should not be operating in isolation, sitting here pushing out security policy without feedback from their users, without feedback from the people that, in theory, they are serving to help protect. There are adversarial relationships, not only within internal IT teams, but within business groups. So what we're really getting at here is if I look back to my early days in system and network administration, when I was operating on the customer side, delivering IT to the business, we thought of the security team as the no people. We needed something, we tried to get it done, they said no, it violates security. That's that type of adversarial relationship that can come in, and the root cause of this is often that ivory tower syndrome. So we need to get past this idea of rigid policies that aren't going to evolve. Security needs to find a way to be fluid enough to meet user and business demands without sacrificing risk. We need to realize that this is not a one-size-fits-all mentality, and that needs to be applied from both the macro level and the micro level. So one-size-fits-all doesn't apply to users, but one-size-fits-all also doesn't apply to businesses. So if your entire security policy is being designed as best practices that the other people use, it might be a total piece of crap for your business because you operate in a different fashion. You need to look at the lack of training, lack of tracking individual training progression. You need to look at how the individuals are absorbing this information and moving forward. So you can think of this from many different perspectives. We don't all learn the same. The way we consume information, the way we absorb it, and the foundational building blocks that we can add new information onto are different to us as individuals. So if we're tracking across our entire company, we're not tracking in a granular enough fashion to create the actual value and data we need to make sure our security awareness programs are moving forward as expected. We also need to stop treating each role the same. Every role is going to be somewhat different from the rest. And so if we look at every role the same, we're going to be doing a lot of things wrong. One of which, when we're getting into those more advanced users that are more tech savvy, we're going to be annoying the living heck out of those users by spoon feeding them stuff that is already common knowledge within their role. And on the flip side, when we're working with people who are not tech savvy and whose roles are not very technical, they're going to need more of that spoon feeding, more of that background to color out what you're trying to train them and the hows and whys. And I think that's a big piece of this is if your security needs to be adaptable, then that security needs to have a little more why and not just how. Users need to understand what they're looking for from a big picture for a phishing email, for example. I need to know what are the cues that are going to show me this is a phishing email, not just 3 examples of phishing emails that I need to identify, right? What are the things that might tip me off? When you start to get out to those broader concepts, you're making that information more adaptable to that end user. So we also need true C-level sponsorship, not a, yeah, sure, go do it, or a, yeah, sure, it needs to be done. But those C-level executives need to be ingrained into how this process gets rolled out and be publicly facing internally as to the fact that they are sponsoring these programs, that they are important to the company. When you look at this, we tend to think of a publicly traded company as fully profit focused. Even if we're looking from that fully profit focus, we need to understand the costs that drain our profit from security breaches. So this should be a top priority to those executives to protect their business, protect their profit, and serve their shareholders, which means they should be showing that same interest internally to the users. One of the most important things I would want to see here is those executives taking part in these programs and not being exempt from it. Leading from the front is always an effective leadership tool. We also need to look at the minimal funding for expected results. So how are we funding these programs? If our funding is limited in these programs, our results are most likely going to be limited with that funding. So are we providing enough revenue into these programs so that they can do the job they're being tasked with doing? These are extremely important concepts and typically top down. So this is a leadership initiative that needs to be taken to both participate and fund these programs effectively. We also need to look at how we advertise these programs and market these programs internally. How are we evangelizing them? In many cases, we're not. And I've sat in many corporate roles where I hear nothing about security compliance. I hear nothing about security compliance training until some automated system says it's time to make everybody check these boxes again. And then some 1980s garbage training gets thrown up on my screen and I have to watch through 60 minutes of crap video and click 3 questions correctly. Get out there and be talking about this. Make it part of the common nomenclature or vernacular within the company. Make sure that sponsorship is there. Excuse me. Make sure people are aware and understand the value of this, the value to them and the value to the company. And there's a lot of value in this to me as an end user within your company or as a staff member of your company. What you're training me is applicable in all the interactions I have online. When I start to learn how to identify a phishing email or what to do to better secure my passwords or my secret tokens or whatever it may be within my role, those same things apply to my personal life. When I start to understand the difference between a secure connection and a non-secure connection, that helps me keep my business secure, but it also helps me keep my personal life secure. So you can utilize those ties between personal and business value to help evangelize this. Excuse me again. You also need to look at how this is prioritized amongst other projects. When we look at a lot of these security awareness initiatives, they have an initial priority that's moderate. But as new things pop up, business problems, revenue goals, the like, they get deprioritized consistently. It's very rare that you'll see a sales leader who's out there killing it, hitting quotas, have to be bogged down to go do that security compliance. Often it gets waived and waived and waived and deprioritized because that revenue is a higher priority. What this does in the mind of your user sets is decrease the value of what you're asking them to do. If it can continually get deprioritized by leadership, why should they be putting priority on it themselves? So remember how you're prioritizing these both on paper and in practice, because it's that in practice that's going to apply. You can think of that parent who's chain smoking cigarettes while telling their kid not to smoke. And how often does that kid end up smoking cigarettes? Because they're watching the action, not the words. The same thing applies here. If you're saying do this, but you're not doing it and making it a priority or evangelizing it in the process, you're not going to get the results you're looking for. you need a feedback loop in all things technology, but especially within these programs. If the idea is you're going to hire some third party to build out a security awareness program and just go roll it out, you're not going to have an effective security awareness program. There needs to be a feedback loop that consists of two major parts. The first major part is going to be, are users absorbing something from this training? Are they getting information and growing with that information? Are they making better security related decisions based on what's going on? And the second is, how effective is the training? Are they engaged? Are they enjoying it? Or are they absolutely hating it? Most of us that have been in an IT role for some time have sat through some variety of security training or even HR training where you pop up some video in the background, let it play while you do your real job, and then guess your way through some questions at the end to hit your compliance goals, right? You're not engaging that user. The more you engage them, the more effective you'll be, and you don't know if you're engaging them without that feedback loop. That feedback loop needs to extend into the executive team and most likely into the C-suite team. There should be a concern at that level. They should be seeing these results. They should also be looking at those results at as much of a ground level as they can. When I'm operating in an executive role, I don't want the roll up upon roll up upon roll up review of the feedback loop, because that gives more chance for summarization, more chance for positive colorization. What I want is to know what's really happening, not what the next tier of leaders might want me to think is happening. So make sure that sometimes you're rolling your sleeves up and looking at that data at lower levels so that you're ensuring you're getting that accurate data without a filtering system that's behind the scenes. So some final thoughts on this area that I have this extreme expertise in for the last 5 minutes. You want to put the work in, right? You've got to get in there and actually do this. And that also means putting the budget in to make sure it can happen. If security awareness is the side job upon side jobs for your security team, then it's going to be treated as the side job among side jobs for your security team. So you need to both put that work in and enable and prioritize your teams to do the same along with you. You need to be creative, right? This is not just off the shelf, bring it in, apply it to everybody. This is, how does this work within my business, for my groups, and for the individual roles within those groups? How can I be creative around the way we engage and deliver this out? And we need to involve others. This is not an ivory tower decision. This needs to be worked with the business leaders and managers across the organization to make it effective. We can't sit and dictate out the way this is going to happen and expect it to work if we're not engaging with the teams that have to absorb this information effectively. So as we're looking at this, we need to rethink the way we look at security awareness and the security awareness training and start to understand the real value this is providing to our company, which goes far beyond some sort of compliance checkbox provided by our insurance provider or a government regulation. And with that, I'm out of slides.
All right. How about that? All right. Jody, what do you think?
Joe, not bad. Honest opinion, I think you actually did, at the core of it, what I was hoping to do is security awareness isn't just security awareness and then walk away from it. It's about instilling a culture of security within your company. And you have to do that by educating people. It just isn't going to happen organically. You have to nurture it. You have to, feed it, water it, prune it, and then show people the results. And then it's a continuous cycle of process. So there's parts in that. It was just like, you started to drift off into like a security program, which is another big topic that I love to babble about and get on my soapbox. And I was trying to like make sure it's like this particular slice of it, narrow focus, but how it does apply. But I did think you did a great job explaining that, or at least kind of alluding to, it's just not about the awareness part of it. It's something that is going to grow and impact your company in a positive way if you do it right. So
I appreciate that. And here at Continuum, we're a big believer in continual processes.
Some might say it's a continuum. Yeah, I might say that,
So Ms. Schaefer, what were your thoughts?
Well, you botched it again. No doubt about that. But you're getting better. I think one day, Joe, you're gonna do great. I do think that you're gonna get there. No, but in all seriousness, I'm always impressed how you're able to act like these are your slides. You've seen this before. You've presented this 100 times. You know the message. I'm very excited, Jody, to see how you meant for them to be presented and the actual information you want to get across. But you did okay, Joe. I'll give you another
Thank you.
Yeah. You totally bomb. You didn't totally bomb. I'll say that.
You didn't totally bomb. There you go. Yeah.
That's a win. We will, my favorite part of this show is always getting to the guest presenting the slides, because I love to figure out what the heck I was supposed to be talking about.
Well, one of the things I like my style of presenting is I hate to look at iChart PowerPoint slides where it's just text and text and text. And so you'll see that mine is a little bit minimal, but I'll talk to the points on there. So some of it, I thought, well, is that fair to him just like to throw up 3 words and have him try to understand what that meant? But I think that's part of what you're doing here is, how do you, the challenge of that, the challenge of doing that in a good way. So
I noticed how you had the people, like when you had the Ivory Tower slide, the boss's back is, flipped. And so, yeah, pay attention.
Yeah, there were, I specifically chose, certain, those cutout people, for certain things. There was some thought behind that. And I thought, there are a lot of times when you are tasked with doing something, you're kind of thrown it and then everybody else walks away and then maybe they'll come back later and ask you how you're doing when there's a checkpoint, but that's it. And there's no other engagement. So it's a big part. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things we like to do with these shows is kind of help presenters learn some tricks for how to present, because you're always going to get hit with something that you may not have immediate expertise in or knowledge of or be ready for in a given presentation. There's always curveballs that can be thrown. And so one of the things that I use here that I think people can replicate is I'm typically just looking for one hook on a slide that triggers something that I can talk about that feels like it ties in. So I just use that hook to bring it back into some area where I might have something to say that sounds adequately intelligent. And that can be an effective tool for any given presenter, depending on what situation you're in.
I love that adequately intelligent is the bar you're going for.
That's the bar. No, I think one of the things you did too that I always tell people, when I'm mentoring them on presentations is, tell a story. When you talked about how you were sitting in front of, either taking the training yourself or presenting something, I mean, that becomes relatable to people. So if you're just like spewing off, hey, your ransomware costs companies this much money a year, and this is this, and it's just like, it is a snooze one where you talk about, okay, I'm just going to, put it on the background and then come back to it later and play. But if you have a story to tell, then they tend to listen. And that's something that I've used throughout my career, especially on the security side, is how do I get people to to pay attention to me and not drift off? And so if you can tell them how this impacts them, or be funny or like scary about something, it's like, okay, wow, well, this is important, I better listen. Or, hey, that's a great way of, I felt the same way too, Jody, type situation.
Yeah, the chain smoking example was, we both perked up. I mean, if you go back and watch the tape, it to your point, there's a lot of behavioral science behind it. People remember stories, they think in stories. There's a lot of reasons why you should do that and how people remember stories better. Because people remember how you made them feel, not necessarily how what you said. So that both just perked us up. If you could go back and watch the tape, we both were like, wait, what? And then it helps make sense a little bit more about what you're talking about.
I like that. And I kind of like the idea, Jody, you just mentioned the idea of making this more applicable to the people taking the training and such. And one way that just instantly came to mind there is if you look at effectively delivering one of these programs and becoming more secure from it, there's going to be a cost savings to the company for that from the breaches and the costs that come with those breaches. So maybe some of that budget floods back into those groups that are doing the training effectively. Maybe create a tangible result that flows back. So X percentage of security savings goes back into those groups as budget to run their programs, hire staff, whatever it may be. That way you're making this real to me, and I have some impact.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely when people see, when you're discussing this, and I've done security awareness presentations at new hire orientations for 10 years at my last job, where I'm in front of 50, 60 people at a time, and they're across a wide variety of roles. And that's one of the things I talk about in here. And, someone that's in the back office, that's in an accounting program, doesn't have the same security risk profile as somebody that might be on a manufacturing floor or a sales guy that's out in the field. And yes, they need to know the core concepts of what you're trying to tell them. And, there's so many different parts of even just security awareness. But then you have to go a little bit further, and you have to say, I'm going to talk to the accounting people right now. And this is why this applies to you. And this is how this could harm you. And this is why you need to listen to this. Or if I'm talking to someone that might work on a production line or in a warehouse, when I get to that part about tailgating, that becomes important. So there's different ways, and you have to do your homework. And that's why I always tell people is like, I can sit out there and present to, an audience of unknowns, but when I'm doing it inside my company, I know who these people are. Mm-hmm. So do your homework and reach out to that person and say, I'll give you an example. And I love to do this. And so when I first started getting college interns coming in at our last company, and they were part of the security awareness, I would get a list of names. They're like, hey, these are the people that are going to come in for the awareness. And I could have just said, okay, great. But no, I sat there and go, I'm inserting a portion about social engineering into my awareness program. So I'm going to social engineer these people. I'm going to see what they have out there. I'm going to look at their Facebook profiles. I'm going to look at this. And so during the presentation, I started talking about, what you do on your Facebook profile, or on, I don't think we're far back as MySpace yet, but I think it was like Facebook and Twitter and everything. And I pulled up a picture of this person, this college intern that she had posted on her page, where they were saying they like Cisco or bust, that's because they were going off and it was their first job. And so they had posted all this information, and I threw it up there. I said, that just makes it a lot easier for people to start social engineering you. If you're talking about, I'm starting a new job and here it is, and here's what I'm going to be doing, and I'm so happy, and I'm, it's like, think about that. And I used some of that, and I was talking to, so I picked on this one person. I never mentioned their name, but I said, yeah, and, she's 20 years younger than me, but, I run a 5K, 10% faster. And, I could see this poor girl in the background. She's like sunk in her chair because she realized I was talking about her, and she wasn't expecting it, but it made an impact. And I wasn't doing it in a cruel way. But something like that, people are like, wow, how did you, I'm like, okay, I'm not using any top secret tools to do this. I used what every one of you in this room could do to social engineer somebody. Yeah. And this is why this is important. And then I would go into my information about that. And all of a sudden it's just like, okay, I'm going to pay attention because this is interesting, or, I can see why how this might hurt me. And I give examples. And that's the power when you're presenting, is how to reach people where they are.
Absolutely. And it's funny because a lot of the effective social engineering tools aren't very advanced. Facebook is basically one giant social engineering platform. Yeah. It's like, hey, upload your picture, give me your mother's maiden name and your date of birth, and I'll show you what you look like at 80. And it's like, okay, let me give you all this information that allows you to access my bank account so that I can see this stupid picture that makes no sense to anybody. Yeah. All right. Without any further of my BS, Jody, will you show us how this is intended to be presented?
I will do that.
It's all yours.
I really did enjoy how you started, though. I thought that was like, boom, you're why they think it sucks is because it sucks. I think that's very strong opening, and I wish I could steal it, but I won't be doing that from you.
You can steal it. And actually you can take credit for it. I encourage you to. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. If you ask any workplace employee how much they enjoy their initial security awareness training or their annual one, you're probably going to get some eye rolls because nobody enjoys doing this. It takes time away from your regular duties. And it's frustrating because it's the same information year after year. You're like, yes, I know what a phishing email is. Yes, I know not to do X, Y, Z. If you are tasked with developing a security awareness program, I want to show you how you can avoid the pitfalls of ones that don't succeed. I've had over a decade of running security awareness programs at both small and enterprise-sized organizations. And with security awareness, October Security Awareness Month approaching, there's still time to make some improvements in yours. And if you're in the planning stages, there's still time to incorporate some of this into what you want to do. So there's lots of reasons, but I'm just going to give you some of the top ones. And this one I think is number one. When you're looking at your security team in general and the culture of your company, what you have is likely adversarial relationships, not only within your internal IT departments, but with the business. Security for so long has been known as the department of no. You come to us, we tell you no. You want to do something, we tell you no. We find out you're doing something and we slap your hands, or maybe we take away whatever you're doing. And so there's a very, the situation there becomes very temperamental. We don't come down from these towers, and I say we when I talk about security people in general, whether you're InfoSec or DataSec or cybersecurity, it's all really the same. We invoke these policies, or procedures, and they're written in stone on tablets from sometime 30 years ago, and we never revisit them. And it's just the way it's always been. And so when you're asking people to listen to you, to help you, with the security posture of your company, and what you're going to get is, oh my God, the security team, they never helped me in the past, and now they want me to help them. The history of checklist compliance is something that if the only time you reach out to people is when they're done something bad or you want something from them, they're going to feel it. And they're going to know that, hey, this is the one time a year we've got to do this. It's a point in time. We're going to have to take this test and then we're over. And there's no follow-up. And so it just becomes another thing on your checklist, and it's never ingrained in the company culture. This is something that I really think is a downfall of most off-the-shelf security awareness programs. This one-size-fits-all mentality. And for some companies, hey, this might work. But if you're at a company that has different types of employees, whether they're in IT, if they're in sales, if they're in the back office function, maybe they're warehouse workers, drivers, whatever. First of all, you need to acknowledge what their day in the life looks like. And going back to that previous slide, if you never come down from your ivory tower, you're never going to know. Before you start your security awareness program or in that initial stage, you should be finding out from these people what it looks like. Why aren't they following your security policies? What do they need some information about? So go out and sit with somebody in their office, or go out and take a walk to that warehouse and find out what are some of the concerns of these people, and where does security kind of throw up some friction in how they work. Maybe there's something that you're doing that really doesn't increase your security posture, but it's just the way you've always done it. And these people have been chafing at that for years. You got to go out there and you have to find this out. The other thing with these off-the-shelf programs that you have is that lack of tracking for individual progress. And this means every year you're taking the same damn security awareness program. Maybe you switched vendors, and so it's like, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm going to go through and I'm going to sit through the slide deck. I'm going to take the test. I'm going to pass. My boss is going to get notified I passed, and then I'm good. There's no, you have to have this progression of, I was at 101. Man, I'm fresh from college. I'm in my first role. I come here, I sit down, I take that one-on-one training. I understand a little bit now. The next iteration of that shouldn't be that same repeat, rinse, repeat again. It should be 201 and then 301. And then, yes, you can incorporate a lot of those core practices into each level, but at a different intensity sometimes. So if you're looking at just putting in a computer-based learning system, as this is all our security awareness program is, this is the pitfall you're going to find. It's very hard to find one that acknowledges all the different types of companies that are out there and the different roles within the company. You have to think about doing more than that. This is a big one regardless of what program you're trying to roll out. When I talk about C-level sponsorship, when you're leading from the front, you got to have that face to it. And I'll ask a question here. How many of you know who your CISO is? Who is your Chief Information Security Officer? I bet you know who your CEO is. But if your security program doesn't have a face, doesn't have a name to it, people aren't going to care. They'll be like, okay, it's just a faceless program, again, that doesn't allow me to do everything I want to do, and sometimes stops me from doing things I want to do. So when you're looking at your awareness program, maybe you don't have a CISO, maybe you just have a security director, maybe you just have a security manager, but they should be the face of the program. Your people should also be out there and be visible. That starts from the top. And when you look at that executive sponsorship, it kind of ties into the next one. You invest in what you care about. So if you don't invest, if you don't fully fund a good security awareness program, you're going to get the expected results. You're going to get a half-assed security awareness program that people don't care about. It needs to be in the budget. It needs to be in the budget for the kickoff, and it needs to be in the annual cycle for that. This is not just one and done. This is a continuous process here. And then when you look at things that might come out of the awareness training, and this should be part of it, is that maybe during the process of building this program and your talks with people and your walkabouts, and when you go and decide how you're going to do this, maybe something comes up and you're like, you know what, that's a good point. We should do X, Y, Z. Because maybe someone said, yeah, I would do this, but you guys always enact this thing. You say, you know what, why do we do that? So revisit some of those decisions and say, maybe we shouldn't require passwords changed every 90 days. People are getting pissed about that, and they're tired of that. Is that just because it's the way we've always done it? Is it a compliance thing? Is something changed and the guidance has changed and we just haven't caught up with that? Can we change that? Can we give something back to those people? And when you can do that and market it with your security awareness program, that's a big win. And I've done that before where we said, okay, this is what we're going to change. And when we launched that change, we wrapped it within our security awareness program. And all of a sudden we're just like, yay, people appreciate that. And then they're invested in what you're trying to do. This is a big one. And I think sometimes when I talk about security awareness, I do perk up again because I am a little evangelist when it comes to this. And if you don't have at least one person on your team that feels the same way, it's going to be a flat effort. And people are not going to care. You have to have someone that feels like this is a passion for them. And maybe it might not even be somebody on your team. Maybe it's someone in an adjacent team that kind of maybe you've worked with or collaborated with before. It's okay to anoint them as a deputy and say, you can go out there. Maybe I'm not good with people. Maybe I don't have that persona which speaks warmth or whatever, or I'm not funny enough, whatever it is. But find somebody, because you need somebody out there that is doing the legwork. That set it and forget it mentality that I've spoke to before is just like one and done. We're going to push this out, and then we are going to just wait for everybody to finish it, and then set the timer, and we'll do it 364 days again. that really doesn't endear people to you. It's just a marker on the road, and they're like, oh, great, it's their annual security awareness training. Okay. It's not something they're going to live and breathe every day. It needs to be something that you're doing on a constant cycle. And this doesn't have to be, and I always tell people, this doesn't have to be, oh my God, so now please don't force people to take a monthly security awareness, training. But you can have people sign up for a newsletter. You can have a website that you send people to. You can go out and have events. And a lot of this stuff, I realized was, like global pandemic, when we were in the offices more, and maybe you had that opportunity to have lunch and learns. But as we open up again, these are powerful ones. And I used to do this where I would advertise a monthly lunch and learn during when I sent out my monthly tip and my little newsletter. I said, hey, if you want to learn about this topic that has to do with security, it doesn't have to do with the company. Maybe it was social engineering, and people just want to learn, how do I protect my kids if they're on Facebook, or now they're on TikTok, and what do I do? And we would do a cone of silence. We're like, okay, I'm not talking to you as Jody Tyrus, security director. I'm talking to you as a parent, and here's some things that I've learned, and here's some research, and be able to give them that information, that data, to help them in their personal lives. And what you've done there, if you've all of a sudden you've seeded those people, and they might go back to their department and say, yeah, I was talking to the security manager, and I did this class and so forth. It's not, you're not forced to go. You give them a topic that is of interest to them so that they'll come to you. That's really important. When you go back to this next point on all stick, no carrot, it does kind of come from that ivory tower of, we're the department of no, and we're just going to beat you until you comply. And people are like, I gotta do it. But you're always going to have people who will resist. And so you want to minimize those people, because you want to give them some incentive. And this incentive can come in many different forms. It can come in positive praise. It can come in the fact that you've done this, so this impacts your annual things that you're required to do. It can be small things. I've learned the power of tchotchkes is so important. You see people get really excited about getting, it's not like a keychain or something, but some kind of tchotchke for coming and doing and sitting in and listening to me talk. Or maybe when you roll it out, you give them a package of things to do. I mean, you look at what we do when we go to conferences. Now, T-shirts and things like that is not because, people are like, I just got this extra money and I want to spend it on something, so let's go ahead and do it. There's a lot of different ways that you can give that carrot. $5 Starbucks gift cards. You'd be surprised how many people will show up for something like that. So think about that, about how you can do that. In many of the more modern security awareness programs and platforms that they have, they've turned to gamification because it does have an impact. So that's a positive, but that can't be the end all. It's like, okay, I'm going to play a game, and it's like, yay, I finished and I won the game. Great. Is there something else that you can do? We talked about, if one of your goals is to have, all the departments, complete their security awareness training by such and such date, make it a game within the departments, and, the winning team gets a pizza party or something like that. Generate some enthusiasm with that. If you have to do that, you have to love security in order to get people to listen to you. So figure out how you can do that. When we come to this last point about low prioritization, this happens a lot, is that you have all the best intentions when you first kick off your security awareness program. You have a plan, you have a calendar, and then the shit hits the fan and bad things happen, and it gets pushed and pushed and pushed. And suddenly you're like, oh, I forgot to send out the newsletter of the month, or I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that. And it just dries up until the next year when you dust it off and you're like, oh shit, I should have done something here and you didn't. So you have to force yourself. If you have to force yourself. Keep that up there in your top prioritizations. There's a lot of things that you can do to make sure that it's a priority. There's a lot of stories out in the news to make sure that most security people sit there and we look at what happened yesterday with Uber, and down in LA with the Unified School District, they had a ransomware problem. So there's enough stories that should keep you motivated, but use those stories to help that prioritization from slipping in other people's minds as well. Because sometimes people are like, I'm just too busy to think about this, or, we had you invited into our department meeting to talk about this, but it, kind of get out. Be tenacious about including yourself in those conversations and about getting that security out there and spreading it. The focus on metrics is important, but if that's the only thing you care about, people will notice. I just want to finish this. I just want to get to 99.9% for all my employees to have finished this by December 31st. You'll get what you put into it. Mm-hmm. So don't just focus on those metrics when it comes to numbers. Focus on, the larger program. Maybe, hey, we got invited to, 6 different department monthly meetings where we were able to spend 10 minutes talking about this security topic. And that's really the other side of the security awareness. It's not just doing this training. It's about planting those seeds in different areas, growing that security culture within your company. So if you're just focusing on, I finished the training, that's all you're going to get. But if you spread that out and figure, there's a lot of different ways we can talk about security in our company and make people aware. It can't just be a test. It can't just be the online training. There's a lot of things about this. The flip side of that is when you do go out, you've got to get that feedback in from your employees. So whether it's just a mailbox where people can send something to and say, hey, I took the training, you know what? I hate these phishing email tests. And I'll tell you, I'm very vocal on Twitter about these phishing email tests that get sent out. And the reason I used to not be that way, and I've kind of full circle, is I know exactly how to craft an email that looks like it comes from Joe Onisick. I know how to do that. If I get into even if I was outside of your system, I know enough about Joe Onisick that if I needed to send an email to an employee of his or a colleague of his, I would be pretty damn good at making it look as realistic as possible. So when you run these email phishing tests, and you've got the advantage already. You know who Jody Tyrus's manager is. You know what the email format looks like. You can spoof certain things. You know what partners we work with. If it's Workday or if it's any other SaaS application, you've got an unfair advantage. And if you really, really wanted to, you're going to win. And it becomes you're back to that adversarial thing. Is I caught you. You messed up. Instead, I think, Joe, you said this, and I actually disagreed with you when you presented earlier, is take that email that you would have sent out that would have been a test, and instead do it as, hey, this is the new phishing email that seems to be running rampant right now, and then point out each of those areas that show why it's dangerous. Instead of using it as a test opportunity, use it as a training opportunity, awareness opportunity. So you still are sending something out, but instead of being punitive, it shows that you're all in this together. Yeah. And that's a lot of feedback that I got from employees when I was running security awareness programs. Is it was a gotcha moment. It's like I felt like I failed. I felt like you put all this effort in and I failed you. And I actually was trying to dial back how crafty I was with my emails, and I realized, well, that's the problem, And so instead of doing these, is there another way that we can judge how well people are getting their training absorbed? When you go back to the executive review, again, as well as the sponsorship, it has to be an open door to come and talk about that. I don't mean like every day you're not going to be able to have the opportunity to go in and be in your CEO's ears and talk about that. But it shouldn't just be once, I've blessed you, now run out and do this program. Be able to give those updates and be able to give them in a pretty unvarnished manner so they understand where you are, and maybe some things that have come out of that security awareness training program that they should keep in mind, because maybe you're going to come back later and ask for some a privileged account management software based out of what you've learned from your security awareness. So you got to have that executive review available. So kind of to wrap this all up, you got to put the work in. And it's not just when you launch the security awareness program. Maybe there's some things that you need to do within your security program itself in advance, going back to how do people view you? How do people view security within your company? Within IT, are you an ally? Are you an adversary? How are you going to change that? What can you do? There's a lot of things that you can do. Talk about be creative. Again, it's so easy just to pay a license, slap your logo on an off-the-shelf software and shove it out there and just wait for the results. You have to be creative. You have to think beyond the online training. You have to think about what else you can do. And there's a lot of sites out there that will talk about that. And I will just tell you, the number one thing that's worked for me really well is go out and meet people. Again, COVID meaning that you can't in person meet, but you certainly can ask, hey, can I join your department meeting? I'd love to talk for 5 minutes about XYZ and how it impacts your department. Be creative when you're talking about how you're going to develop this in different aspects, the online training, the monthly brown bags, it has to have a theme. People have to know what you're doing. I think that engenders people to what your efforts are. The involve others kind of, pulls it all together. It's if you want the awareness, why are you doing this? I mean, that's the thing is if it's just a checklist, but if you're going into this with, I need better security, and I have 5,000 employees out there that are both my biggest risk, but also my best advantage. If I can turn them into an aware employee who knows what they're doing, who feels comfortable coming to me when something does go wrong or when something doesn't feel right, you got to involve those other people into doing this. When you do all that, you have a comprehensive security awareness program that people don't think sucks, and they'll be a part of your security team. Thank you.
So, Joe, I hope you were taking notes. That's how it's done.
I was. There was so much good information in there, Jody. There two points stuck out with me quite a bit, and the first one was you've got to be passionate about security to sell security internally, and that's like universally applicable across sales. I recently sold a Jeep, and while I was in the dealership selling the Jeep, I asked about the new Jeep pickup truck model. They've taken the Wrangler and extended it with a pickup truck bed. And I asked the sales guy about it just out of curiosity, because I'm not personally a fan. And he said, yeah, they're pretty popular. People are, liking them. And his lack of enthusiasm reinforced my lack of enthusiasm. You can't promote something that you're not passionate about effectively. So that one was brilliant. And then in the executive feedback loop, first of all, that whole concept is key, but I think one thing executives tend to lack is getting enough down to ground level. And so the way I always look at that is if the C-suite thinks about how much filtering they put into information before they present it to Wall Street or the board, their next level is putting that same amount of effort into filtering information before it gets to them. So if you want unfiltered information, you're going to have to skip levels occasionally and see where the rubber hits the road.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I remember one of the most memorable moments I had when I was presenting to a board of directors one time, and this is probably back in like 2006. And so if you're as old as I am, you remember when spam started. It was about 2004, really overnight. And so I had this another presentation that I was giving to the board about, I don't know, some budget request or something, and my boss was there, and he's like, don't mess this up. Stay on target. I'm like, okay. And I had one of the owners of the company lean forward and say, what are we doing about spam? Because I get a lot of spam still. And I'm like, okay, I'll talk about spam all day, because I've been breathing it for the last, 12 months trying to stop the deluge of spam. That's what they wanted to talk about. And so when you find out what your executives care about, that can be your opening into other things. You can't just assume that they don't care. But if you never have that opportunity to talk to them or reach out to them, you're never going to know.
Absolutely. And you know, it goes without saying, you don't know what you don't know. I remember an executive briefing with a large company, and I was joking about compact servers still being on the data center floor of hospital data centers. And this was a hospital customer. And this conversation was in 2017. For those not aware, Compaq was acquired by HP in like the late 90s, right? So the CEO and CIO kind of laughed and said, well, we don't have that problem, right? And they looked at their server VP, who said, no, we decommissioned the last one last month. And so they had no idea that they were running servers that had a logo that doesn't exist anymore for the last nearly decade, right? So you never know what you don't know unless you start asking questions.
Yeah. I like, you know, kind of tying or piggyback off of that, you know, like you said, Jody, talk to people, but I also like that because I think it's very easy to forget people in the warehouse or on the production line. I think it's very easy to forget that they're not in front of their laptops all day. Some of them don't have a laptop. And I think when we're really looking at, you know, this kind of ties into the whole idea of inclusivity too. If we're really looking at driving this level of awareness, we have to understand the audience, start with why, like how you ended the presentation. Why are we doing this? If we really want to drive awareness and change behavior, we have to meet people where they're at and understand what their roles are, what's getting in their way, as opposed to just adding another layer of check the box or do this or comply with that, you know? So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. I think that's an area that can often get overlooked, but also is just as much of a risk factor if you don't do it right.
Yeah, one of the things I fought for when I've done security awareness programs too is you think about typically they tie into your employee database. And so you're like, okay, all employees. And think about how many other people you have in your organization that aren't employees. You're going to have contractors, you're going to have consultants, you're going to have people that are there. And if you don't include them in a security awareness program, especially if you've outsourced something, but maybe they're still on site, but you don't include them because they're not in your load for your employee database, you're missing a key critical audience there. When you think about who those personas are that you're talking to, it may be different if you're talking to someone that's out in a warehouse that, okay, you know, physical security there seems really important and really, really key. If you're talking to someone that's an employee that's in accounting, there's certain topics that are going to resonate more with them. If we're talking to a consultant that works in IT, there's going to be different topics that you want to hit on with them. And there's going to be different things because in your mind, your security program should already have different protections for how those people operate. And if they don't, this can help illuminate those. You're like, hey, you know what? I would have, if I was still running a security awareness program as a day security person, I would have used yesterday's Uber breach as a learning experience. And I would have sent it to the IT group, maybe developers, maybe our infrastructure team. I would have said, man, do you see what happened here? This is why privileged account management is important. You see what they did there. Maybe someone forgot that they're not supposed to use their regular account, to log into AWS and to manage it instead of checking out that credential and doing that. I mean, there's different ways. I'm not trying to point your fingers at this, but this starts the discussion. And you can use this. It doesn't have to be through email. It can be a Slack channel. It can be, discussion boards that you might have. But this is how you get security in the forefront of people's minds. It's like, wow, how, what can we do? And not just throwing edicts out there, but have a conversation with someone and say, Joe, this happened, could that happen here? What should we be worried about? How does it work? How do you guys work? What is your process? Instead of just shoving a process in their face, tell them how they're working now, and then figure out together how you can better it. Now you've got, that collaboration is a lot stronger than the enforcement part of it is.
Makes sense. So Jody, I'm going to ask Sabrina to kind of grade and judge who did this better. But while she's doing that, if you could think of just if there's one thing you want to leave the audience with before we close out the show, I'll give you a minute to think about that. And Sabrina, could you please break the news kindly to Jody?
First of all, Jody, I want to see that email. I would love to see the Joe Onisick spoof email. I'm here for that. If you could send that my way, I would appreciate it. We can, post it below or something like that. I don't know, but I think that's hilarious. I'd love to see that. Joe, like I said, you're getting better. I think one day you'll get there. But no, I have to give this one to Jody, hands down. Sorry, Joe. Maybe better luck next time.
Luckily, my ego is way overinflated, so it can take this type of damage.
Just deflates a tiny little bit.
All right, Jody. Anything come to mind of like that one nugget for people?
I go back to this a lot. And no matter what area of life you're talking about, you invest in what you care about. You invest time, effort, and money in what you care about. If you're saying you care about security awareness, you have to make that investment in different channels. But you got to believe in it as well. And when you do, and when you can filter that down to your team, to your colleagues, and out to your greater organization audience, it can be very powerful. It could mean the difference between finding a ransomware breach in 2 days versus finding one in 40 days. And I've had that happen where someone called me up like, hey, you know what? I remember you talking to me about this. And I think that might have happened, but I don't want to bug people. And I've jumped right on it. And, we were able to successfully stop something. And so people have to know that you care about them and that you're not going to just abandon them once they finish their annual training. It has to be all the time awareness.
I agree. That makes a ton of sense. And so inevitably, I can do words. I swear I can. People are going to watch this and want to get to know Jody more, get more Jody information. Where should they go for that?
I'm on Twitter. I'm J Tyrus. I try to keep it really, really simple. So it's J Tyrus, not Tyrus, but J Tyrus everywhere. Twitter, J Tyrus on Twitter, J Tyrus on Instagram. You get a little bit of, Jody Tyrus at Gmail, but you'll get a little bit of everything. You'll get security awareness. You'll get chocolate. You'll get Lord of the Rings. You get a little bit of everything. But I find that helps people relate to me if I'm not just security in the past. That's really been a benefit.
Excellent. And I will shamelessly plug Jody's chocolate. It is a favorite amongst this household. We order it regularly. It is absolutely fantastic. So if you are a chocolate fan, I suggest you check it out.
SoleraChocolates.com. It's great. It's great. It's cool enough now that I can make it and ship it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Jody. This was amazing. Sabrina, I can't say the same for you, but I guess your being here was good.
Maybe, I don't know. But it was nice to see you, Jody. Thank you very much. Good.
It was good to get proof of life for you, Joe.
There you go. Yeah, he's alive.
I am still alive.
Yeah.
Well, we know. All right, everyone. See you next time.